At my son's lobby door, I tapped my keycard, and the light blinked red owner's orders. The guard said 1 week after my husband died, and 68 million sat in my name. The humiliation stung, but years of keeping a harbor afloat taught me to breathe smooth my coat and count to 3. That night at his long walnut table with a pen where dinner should have been, I read every line, then slid the pen back and said one word, no. I didn't raise my voice. I raised my standards, and that no was only the first tide turning. What followed would test blood law and the quiet kind of courage no one claps for. Before I continue the story, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. I eased my sedan to the curb outside the glass and steel tower on Darby Street. Salem's harbor fog clung to my coat and hair, leaving a chill beneath the June sun. It was June 10th, 2025, a week after the funeral, and the city smelled faintly of brine and wet brick. I took my purse, slid my phone and car keys into the side pocket, and palmed the small silver hair clip, the way some people hold a prayer coin. Inside the lobby glowed like a showroom marble floors, a quiet fountain, a concierge desk shining beneath recessed lights. People walked the length of the hall with the purposeful hush of late afternoon umbrellas cooling at their ankles. I lifted the keycard and tapped. A red light blinked. A thin, dry chime protested. I tried again, slower, the way you calm a skittish animal. Red again, the same sterile sound. The concierge, young and careful, stood. "Ma'am," he said, eyes flicking to the screen, then to my face. "I'm sorry, the system shows your access as deactivated." He softened the next phrase as though it would land more gently. "Owner's orders." The words did not sting so much as cool the air around them like a door cracked in winter. "There must be a mistake," I said, and kept my voice even. He nodded with the helplessness of policy. "I can't override." As I stepped back to gather my thoughts, the elevator doors opened and Shannon crossed the lobby with cardboard tubes cradled like rolled maps. She had the brisk cheer of a person riding momentum. Credit reel branding cut the long segment, she told the man beside her, not bothering to lower her voice. The tubes knocked lightly against her hip, and she kept moving heels, clocking a rhythm across marble. I did not call after her. I stored the phrase where I keep winter receipts and birthdays in the place I trust more than tempers. "May I see the visitor log?" I asked the concierge. He hesitated, then slid a clipboard forward. The pen on the string scraped without ink. I tried again with the spare, and it bled a blue track. In the columns, my name was already printed from past months, Ellison Mora, and today, in small font. On the system line, a timestamp deactivated 10:12 a.m. No commentary, no apology. Just the fact of it, neat as a ledger entry. I traced the numbers with my eyes, and something settled in me the way a book closes when you reach the truth on a page you did not want to find. A wall monitor cycled through our company's montage, tugboats and fog cranes swinging over the harbor, hands in gloves, guiding line. My shoulder made a cameo at the far edge of one shot. The caption below it read, "Founders, Gannon, Rhodes, and Family." Family can be a generous word or a razor-thin one. An editor had cropped the frame just enough to make my presence an accident. I watched the loop twice, then a third time, until the fountain's hush sounded louder than the footage. I buttoned my coat and let the screen do what it was built to do, erase what it did not name. I stepped aside to the window and called Joran. The voicemail tone clicked on. "It's Mom," I said, voice even. "I came to pick up documents from the condo. I need access to the unit to retrieve what belongs to your father and me. Please call me back." I added, "Daniel's wooden document box is in the hall closet. I will remove only that and the file marked trust schedules." I ended the call and saved the timestamp without thinking. After 40 years of bookkeeping, habits arranged themselves like cutlery in a drawer. In my pocket, the silver hair clip lay cool against my palm. Daniel gave it to me when we were poor and in love to keep my hair out of my eyes while I worked his numbers at the kitchen table. I could have asked for a supervisor, could have recited the trust clauses that leave no room for interpretation, but the staff wasn't my quarrel. I placed the keycard on the desk for the concierge to log and thanked him for his courtesy. The rain began to freckle the lobby glass, tiny coins spinning down the panes. I stood there long enough to feel my breath steady. Then I turned away. Outside, I unlocked the sedan and sat long enough to hear the soft tick of cooling metal. The harbor horns moaned somewhere beyond the warehouses, and gulls made short work of a paper bag in the gutter. I set the purse on the passenger seat, laid my phone atop it, and watched a single drop of water crawl down the windshield like a slow thought. I would not argue for a doorway. I would not beg for a hallway. When people tell you who they are with a beep, believe the beep. I breathed in the salt, out the ache, and let resolve choose my posture. On the passenger floor, a program from the service slid forward on a turn. Daniel's name in bold looked formal beside his years. I touched the corner with my shoe and let it ride. The sky kept its opinions to itself. I set the wipers to intermittent and checked fuel for Gloucester. The phone buzzed in my hand. A text slid across the screen with my son's name above it. 7 p.m. tonight, come sign. No greeting, no please, just the summons. I closed my hand around the silver clip and steered for Gloucester. By 7, I kept the appointment at my son's house. The Gloucester drive could wait. The rain had rinsed the North Shore clean. Inside the foyer, the air was lemon and cool. There was no embrace, no, "How are you holding up, Mom only?" Shannon's polished smile and a gesture toward the dining room. The walnut table ran like a runway polished to a mirror. No place settings. Unopened wine flanked a stack of documents at center stage. A single black pen rested where a plate should have been perfectly aligned with the edges, as if precision could stand in for kindness. I put my purse down and stayed standing. The house sounded too still, all hum and ductwork, the kind of quiet that listens for your compliance. Duran came in without looking at me first, the way men enter a meeting where the outcome is assumed. He laced his fingers and said, "If you don't sign, you're no longer part of this family. Not a tremor, not a preface, just a sentence, placed like a blade." I let the silence widen around it and took the chair opposite him. I pulled the stack close. Power of attorney, the title read. Behind it, a management agreement, longer with neat clauses that funneled every decision, investment, sale, disbursement through Duran alone. Pages about fees, indemnities, streamlining. I read each line. I trace dates with my finger. The paper smelled faintly of toner. Shannon poured nothing and waited like a hostess at a tasting that never begins. Why a power of attorney, now I asked. Not sharp, just level. Gannon is gone. This would have made more sense before a hospital, not after a funeral. Efficiency, Duran said. Vendors need a point person. Banks do too. You shouldn't be burdened. We can make it stress-free. Shannon added, her voice satin. You keep what you need. We handle the real work. Her eyes skipped over me to the signatures to the pen. The pen. I picked it up to feel its weight. It was the model Gannon liked, a smooth-barreled roller ball he would click once and then never again until the ink met paper. I saw his hand in flash-steadying contracts while the tughorn sounded, pressing my fingers after we closed on a loan, murmuring, "We'll steer it together." The metal cooled my palm. The memory warmed my spine. I set the nib to the signature line and watched the reflection of my wrist in the tabletop. Breathing in, I slid the pen forward until it touched the top document, and then I pushed it back across the stack until it came to rest by Duran's cuff. No, it wasn't loud. It filled the room anyway. Something in Shannon's smile shifted, edges showing. Duran's jaw flexed a small tick under a day's worth of stubble. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," he said. "The condo is under my LLC. Leases can change. I can't help you if you won't help us." "I'm not asking for help," I said. "I'm refusing control." I squared the pages so the corners were neat. And a power of attorney doesn't resurrect the dead. Shannon leaned forward, hands folded like a brochure. "Maura, think of the stress. You've been through so much. Let us simplify your life. Keep a few million travel. We'll make sure everything else is optimized. I have eaten stress for breakfast most of my life, I said. It never learned my name. I felt the silver hair clip in my pocket, a small weight like a lighthouse in miniature, and I do not sign under threat. The room seemed to tighten. Joanne glanced at the untouched wine, then at the window where the last of the rain wormed down the glass. You're choosing to be difficult. I'm choosing to be deliberate. I stood. The chair legs did not scrape. I lifted them. Thank you for showing me your plan. Joanne rose in reflex the way he used to when a teacher entered a classroom. Old training survives strange storms. You'll regret this, he said, quieter now. Maybe I answered, picking up my purse. But I've regretted smaller things for longer. I don't plan to add to the pile. I slid the pen back 1 more inch with a fingertip. Find another signature. I walked to the foyer. The lemon polish smelled brighter near the door. My phone vibrated as I reached the handle. A voicemail alert stacked over the old one. I didn't play it. The night air outside was damp and honest. I touched the clip, fixed it in my hair without a mirror, and let the cool bite steady me. On the porch, Shannon's voice followed, not a shout, a stage whisper. She'll be back. Perhaps I would, but not the way she meant. I took the steps slowly, not to dramatize, but to prove to my knees and to the night that I still chose my pace. The car unlocked with a soft thud. I set the purse on the passenger seat, and folded both hands on the wheel. Through the windshield, the house glowed with its catalog quiet. I thought of the boxes at the seaside place of the envelope Gannon once promised would be where I could find it, and of the life I had held together with lists and mercy. I started the engine. The dash clock clicked to 7:42. Headlights picked out the wet street and the slick black of other people's plans. Gloucester would have light in the windows and salt in the air. Enough. My phone buzzed again, a text bright on the console. 7 p.m. tonight, come sign. He'd sent it an hour ago, as if the future could be scheduled like a delivery window. I closed my fist around the silver clip and turned the car toward the only door that still knew my key. Fog along the Gloucester harbor had thinned to gauze by the time I coasted to the granite curb. I sat a moment with both hands on the wheel, listening to the distant bell at the breakwater. The house waited the way old friends do, quietly, without questions. When I climbed the steps, salt feathered the rail. I pressed the brass key into the lock. The cylinder resisted, then yielded with the familiar hinge creak that had greeted us for 30 years. I didn't rush to tidy anything, least of all myself. Grief moves like tidewater. It goes out slower than it comes in. I hung my damp coat beside his rain jacket cuffs, stiff from one last storm, and crossed the living room. The rug still buckled where he'd once sloshed coffee mid-joke. The mantel clock ticked, as if news never happened. I touched the frame from the tug christening and let my hand rest on cool glass. The house received me with the kind of mercy that does not speak. In the kitchen, I left the overheads off and clicked the small lamp above the stove. Its warm triangle fell across the shallow drawer by the fridge. Habit reached before thought. Rubber bands, spare keys, pencil stubs, and an envelope atop a folded linen napkin. My name in Gannon's even hand. The sight of it didn't break me. It gathered me. I sat and opened it with a fingernail. His note was brief, the way he wrote when it mattered. Keep it and use it as you see fit. No explanations needed. I trust you. I read it twice, the quiet of his voice threaded through every spare word. Gannon never handed speeches. He handed tools. The letter felt like a key more than a comfort. I set it on the oak and took the small silver hair clip from my pocket, the one he gave me to keep my hair out of my eyes when the wind rose. I laid it across the paper so the metal could catch the light. Storms pass, he used to say, when an engine seized or a season turned and we had to make 3 lean months feel like 2. Steer the line, you know. I filled the kettle and let its soft rattle steady my hands. When the water clicked off, I made plain tea and carried the mug to the secretary desk in the corner. The desk opened to neat stacks folders in my script trust deeds, vessel logs, insurance. Recent statements were clipped with colored flags. I fanned them across the blotter and reached for a pad. The first list wasn't about people, it was about steps. Meet Conrad, review titles, confirm beneficiaries, freeze discretionary transfers until audit completes, dates and times in the margin as if the calls were already scheduled, numbers, first stories, second. A line in a bank feed made me pause a monthly consulting transfer to a Shell LLC whose address matched Joran's satellite office. It could be legitimate. It could also be something someone assumed I would overlook while tending casseroles and condolences. I starred it and moved on. One asterisk is a question mark, not a verdict. I called Conrad. Voicemail picked up his off-hours voice, warm and brisk. Conrad, it's Maura. I'm at Gloucester. I want to review the trust and deeds today, if possible, tomorrow at the latest. Please call with a time. I hung up and called Anitra. It's Maura. I need a full sweep of personal and business accounts. Start with 36 months. Flag new entities, changed recurring payments, and any transfers lacking invoices. I'll send scans within the hour. I wrote the timestamps under my to-do list. T finished, I fastened the silver clip. The simple click felt like striking a small bell. I cracked the windows an inch. The harbor answered with diesel and kelp and the slap of lines against pilings. Breath went in and out on the boatman's count, steady, practical enough. On the shelf by the window sat Gannon's harbor log, canvas cover, scuffed pages, the color of sailcloth. I brought it to the table. His handwriting leaned right, patient as ever. Engine hours. Parts on order. Crew notes. Then an entry dated June 2019 J. Floated offer from developers sell slips warehouse fuel. Declined. Water is work, not a chip. E understands. 3 lines. No anger, no sermon. A record and a choice. I slid the log back and sent Anitra the scanned statements, flags my starred page. Folder names were plain enough for a jury. Before I shut the desk, I slipped Gannon's letter into a clear sleeve and placed it atop the ledger that held the transfers. One spoke for heart, one for proof. Together they formed a map. I stepped onto the porch with my mug while the emails pushed through. Gulls worried the air above a charter boat easing past Dog Bar. Across the lane, Mrs. Keene's orange cat watched me like I was late to something important. I smiled despite the day and sat on the top step. The clip held firm against a small onshore breeze. Conrad called back. 2:00, he said. Bring what you flagged. No dramatics, just work. Anitra texted moments later with a checklist and a promise to be at my table by mid-morning tomorrow. The machine of my life, dented but intact, began to hum again. Before I closed the door for the night, I returned to the desk, squared the blotter, and looked once more at the note. Trust he'd written, not hope trust. Hope asks the weather to change. Trust looks at the chart and sets a course you're willing to hold in rain. The town kept still. I set the letter on the ledger and left one instruction on Anitra's voicemail: audit everything. Tomorrow would begin with numbers. By mid-morning, the kitchen smelled of strong coffee and sea air. Anitra arrived with a slim laptop, a portable scanner the size of a paperback, and the kind of canvas tote you bring when you plan to stay. We slid the fruit bowl aside and turned the table into a desk folders to my left, her device to my right, a neat lane down the center for paper to travel. Grief gave us the room. Method filled it. We began with a first pass. I stacked bank and card statements by month while she keyed vendors into a quick index sorting by name, date, and memo. The scanner hummed a practical tune. PDFs blinked into labeled folders on her screen. We didn't talk about people. We talked about categories and timing, what posted on weekdays, what always hit on a Friday, what appeared only once and never again. Odd receipts surfaced like shells in a receding wave. High-end furnishings from a Back Bay showroom coded operations. Boutique hotel charges tagged client hospitality on weekends when the harbor was quiet. A tasting menu for 4 in Providence. On a Tuesday, no tug ever left the dock. We flagged each with a yellow note and kept our pace. Suspicion is a poor accountant. Patterns are better. Then the shadow edged in. 3 transfers modest, then larger, to a holding company with a tidy name, and a P.O. box I recognized from Duran's satellite office. The memo lines were Air Consolidation Streamline Q3AG. Anitra's mouth pressed into a thin line. "Let's mark those for drill down," she said, and her fingers flew to pull corporation filings and officers of record. "Managing member," she read. The room didn't tilt, it clarified. We built a small mosaic on the table. 30 microtransactions spread across 14 weeks grouped by purpose, with my sticky notes furnishings, leisure hospitality travel. She printed a single page of totals and clipped it to the corner, while I annotated dates I knew with fax launch party storm delay board meeting. Numbers don't need help speaking, but they do better with context. I felt the familiar heat of anger knock, and I let it wait on the porch while I sharpened my pencil. "Personal versus business," I said. "We stay fair." She nodded. We moved a handful of line items back into the legitimate column fuel at the shipyard co-op boots for a new deckhand, a generator service call after the April gale. The point was never to win a fight. The point was to get it right. When we finished, the remaining yellow notes formed a narrow, undeniable spine. Anitra drew a clean sheet and sketched a simple repayment outline interest tied to prime timelines that wouldn't crush cash flow. "No threats," I said, reading the line of figures as if they were weather. "Just math." She smiled without triumph. "Math is persuasive. We both knew this wasn't the moment to deliver it. It was the moment to prepare it. Quiet power does not love applause." I stepped to the porch for a breath, the clip steady in my hair, then came back and called Conrad. "Preliminary findings," I told him. "We'll package scans by end of day. I need your eyes on the trust and a quick look at easements tomorrow." He mentioned the Essex Registry and a clerk who still remembered Gannon. We agreed not to say more over the phone than the day required. Back at the table, I tapped the page with the largest total and said what I needed to hear out loud. "We correct. We don't humiliate." Anitra set down her pen. "That line will hold," she said, "even if they try to drag you past it." The kettle clicked off by itself, small mercy, as if the house approved. We scanned everything, fronts, backs, statements, receipts. File names were plain and disciplined. 2024 keycard ending 81.pdf, 2023 to 999 vendor list.pdf. A copy set went to a labeled drive for Conrad, another to a folder on my desktop named simply Gloucester Audit. Originals went back into the secretary locked behind a brass key I wore on a ring with the car fob. We left nothing loose enough to blow off the table if a window opened. The day eased toward late light. Anitra packed the scanner and left with a promise to run one more pass after dinner, then texted before she reached the rotary that the final folders were uploading. I wiped the table and placed Gannon's letter on the blotter, the clip glinting where afternoon sun finally found it. Integrity isn't a speech. It's a stack of labeled files ready for any room. Conrad texted one line before sundown, Essex Registry, 9 a.m. "Bring the deed and vessel logs." Morning fog beaded on the marble steps of the Essex Registry as I met Conrad at the door. He lifted 2 fingers in greeting brief, and we fell into step without small talk. Inside, the air held courthouse quiet. I touched the silver clip at my temple and felt the old steadiness settle. The front counter clerk recognized Conrad's card and guided us past the public terminals to a row of index books and newer screens. "Grantor, grantee will be fastest," she said, and slid a keyboard toward him. He typed the trust name first, then the operating company, then my own. Instrument numbers populated in a lean column, each a breadcrumb from a year when Gannon and I were younger, and building, not guarding. We didn't narrate what we saw. We followed the trail. The hit came on the 3rd search, a title with an edge to it. Working Waterfront Preservation Easement appeared next to the harbor parcel. The date was 5 summers back. Conrad tapped the link. A PDF expanded like a tide chart. For the first time that morning, my breath moved from my chest to my diaphragm. "There it is," he said, voice ordinary, as if ordering coffee. We printed the instrument and took a bench beneath a narrow window. The paper smelled faintly of toner and dust. Clauses laid themselves out in plain lines, maritime use preserved, no conversion of structures into residential condos, no sale or encumbrance for non-working purposes without written consent of the trustee of the Ellison Family Trust. Not poetry, just boundaries you could point to. Conrad drew his pen down the margin until it stopped at a paragraph that read like a trapdoor. Here he said, "A right of first refusal in favor of a community partner if conditions were violated, reversion if misuse persisted, injunctive relief by stipulation." No grandstanding language, just a lock that had been turned and recorded while Gannon was alive and thinking ahead. My jaw finally unclenched. "We should modernize your proof of authority," Conrad said, already composing an email to himself. A fresh memorandum of trust notarized and recorded. Same trustee, no change to powers. It helps title officers move faster when someone tries to, move around you. I nodded. We weren't here to brandish anything. We set posts. The clerk notarized my signature at a side counter. Her stamp thumped the page with friendly finality, and the scanner swallowed the document into the record. We requested certified copies, one for my desk, one for Conrad, one for the city file. He filed a brief notice summarizing the easement and the consent requirement, cross-referenced to the instrument number that now might as well have been carved into granite. The clerk slid over the receipts. Book and page numbers inked the corner. Conrad wrote them on my copy, circled the instrument number, then tucked it into his file. We paused at the door and looked at the bulletin board charity row sign-ups. A lost kayak notice. Ordinary life around a record that would hold. On the sidewalk, the fog had thinned to a gauze. I texted Anitra a single line easement confirmed. Send a bullet summary to the donor chair and mark it for awareness. 3 dots bubbled, then her reply, on it. Also, the Chamber Memorial Program lists tomorrow at noon. Shannon is slated to MC. I looked at the time and pictured a microphone in her hand. Paper is one truth, rooms are another. Back in Gloucester, I unlocked the secretary and laid the certified copies under Gannon's letter. I labeled a red folder Exhibit a Title and Easement and slid a sticky index to mark the reversion and consent sections. The desk's brass key clicked twice a sound I have always loved. I placed a second copy in the slim briefcase I hadn't carried in years. Quiet defenses are still defenses. I opened my calendar and circled tomorrow's memorial in red. The chamber would dress the hall in flowers and flags. Shannon would hold a microphone and say the words I could already hear, legacy, innovation, vision. I added a simple note at the top of the daytime stamp video. Not for spectacle, for record. I straightened the clip in my hair and felt the harbor's low motor hum through the window. Before noon, I walked to the harbor office and signed the log to leave a courtesy copy for the city file. The receptionist printed the instrument number on a manila tab, and I initialed the receipt. I asked that it be routed to the harbor master's inbox by close of business. No fanfare, just paper where paper belongs. On a bench outside, I photographed the certified pages and sent Conrad a link labeled Filed. Back home, I laid out tomorrow's tools briefcase charger, spare battery and notebook. I set the camera to timestamp and filmed the kettle as a test. I wrote 2 lines, speak only when necessary. Let the record speak when I cannot. Anxious energy found shape. Dates, names, exhibits, order. I set a glass by the letter, locked the drawer, and stood in the porch doorway. I tucked a stray hair under the silver clip and thought of every time Gannon and I chose the long way rather than the loud one. It had not failed us then. It would not fail me now. Conrad called on his drive back. "Anything else you want me to pull?" he asked. "That's enough for now," I said. "We'll keep the rest of our weight in reserve." He liked that. We exchanged the kind of goodbye that means, "See you soon." With the easement sealed and copied, I circled tomorrow's memorial in red. Shannon would hold a microphone. I would bring a timestamp. I arrived early before the florist finished fanning the lilies under the stage lights. The program lay in neat stacks on a side table. White cover, blue serif type. Founders, Gannon Rhodes, and family. The line read. No mention of me by name. A simple omission. I traced the ink with a fingertip, then slid the booklet into my bag. The silver clip held steady. I took a seat on the aisle where the camera tripod could see the screen and my watch in the same frame. At the AV booth, a black polo labeled Marco Adjusted Sliders. "Good afternoon," I said, keeping my voice level. "Could I confirm the video order?" He turned the monitor toward me, a list of files each with timestamps. The one queued for the tribute wore a tidy label, V6 short final. There was an earlier version marked V3 full, I said. "If you need it, I have the email thread." Marco nodded unconcerned. "We'll run the deck as provided," he said. "If we need a switch, I'll let the chair know." Shannon opened the program on the dot of noon. Her voice had the gleam of lacquer words, rounded and precise. "We gather to honor a builder, a husband, a father," she said, and the donors breathed as one. The harbor wives dabbed their eyes. The chamber chair, Ms. Dwyer, sat front center with her clipboard. Shannon promised a complete tribute, a story in full. I kept my face neutral and let the edges of the room soften. I had been loved by Gannon. I did not need a microphone to prove it. The lights dimmed. The video began with cranes and gulls and a trumpet of salt air. Names flickered over photographs, investors, captains, suppliers. When the montage reached the year we opened the third pier, the caption read, "Founders, Gannon, Rhodes, and Family," and the shot skipped past my hands on the ledger to a drone sweep of boats. The applause came like rain on a roof. I sat still and felt the old narrow sting, private, controlled, survivable. I exhaled once slow and let the moment end without me. While the room murmured, I lifted my phone and began recording. The lens took in the screen, then dipped to the printed program on my lap, then up to the wall clock above the side doors. The overlay stamp glowed, 12:21:13 p.m., JUN 13/2025. I crossed the aisle to the booth. Marco. I said, "I think a mistake slipped through. Here's the earlier export and the email approving my captioned segment." I held out my phone with the thread-queued dates, subject lines, and an attachment list where V3 full sat like a stone in the list. He scanned the messages, then glanced at the playback bar. "We can swap on the floor," he said. "Chair's call." He lifted a finger, and Ms. Dwyer rose without fuss, made her way to us, and bent to hear in the low buzz. She smelled of coffee. I showed her the program line and the email with the approved caption, then the clock on my screen. No speech, I said, just the correct file. She appreciated the sentence that wasn't there and gave a brief nod that meant proceed. On her nod, Marco cued the earlier export. Ms. Dwyer stepped to the podium between segments, the practiced smile of someone who solves things while the coffee is still hot. "A brief correction," she said. "We will replay the memorial tribute using the complete version approved by the family." Shannon held the mic a beat too long, then surrendered it. The house lights dimmed again. The corrected video rolled. On the pier sequence, the caption read, "Clean Founders Gannon Rhodes and Maura Ellison." My face appeared in an old, still wind-streaked the ledger under my hand. Applause rose softer this time, less like weather and more like judgment collecting itself. Shannon returned to the mic with a poise polished from 1,000 mirror checks. Our apologies for a technical oversight, she said, the words landing on felt feet. "We are grateful to have the complete tribute." She gestured toward me without hunting me with her eyes. I offered a nod not large enough to be quoted and stayed in my row. In the aisle, a harbor wife squeezed my hand once the way women do when no one's looking. A donor leaned in as we filtered toward the lobby. "Good to see it right," he said, as if adjusting a picture on a wall. I thanked him. I did not elaborate. Outside the annex doors, the June air smelled of stone, warmed at last by the thinning sun. I set my back to the brick and let my pulse even until the spots at the edge of my vision cleared. My phone buzzed. "Joran, that wasn't necessary." I typed with my thumb, unhurried. "Correction is necessary. 9 a.m. tomorrow. My place. Witnessed. 3 dots. Then nothing." I added the appointment to my calendar and set an alert for 8:45. The silver clip sat light and certain above my ear. The part of me that wanted to write paragraphs to my son remained uncapped, and then I capped it anyway. On my way out, the founder's wall waited in its brass frame, the cropped harbor image still trimmed at the shoulder. I took a photo with the plaque and the hallway clock in the same frame and emailed Ms. Dwyer attaching reference. Please schedule a credit review for the wall before month's end. Her reply pinged quickly. Agree. Let's meet next week. I thanked her with one word and put the phone away, resisting the urge to explain the history the way people explain architecture in the rain. The applause faded. The cropped frame didn't. I sent Ms. Dwyer my photo and circled 9:00 a.m. on my kitchen clock. I set the kitchen table the way Gannon liked his charts, squared, labeled calm. 2 chairs faced mine. 2 more sat slightly back for the witnesses. On the placemats, I laid 3 tidy packets, finding schedule acknowledgement, and a single pen aligned with the table seam. The windows were cracked to the harbor's faint diesel, and the silver clip held my hair neat. Conrad arrived first trench coat damp at the cuffs. With him came Ms. Leone, a notary I'd used for boat titles years ago. We shook hands like neighbors about to sign for a fence, not a family line. Ground rules, I said. 20 minutes. Civil voices. We read before we sign. Ms. Leone nodded, opened her stamp case, and set a small clock between the coasters. Joanne and Shannon came at 9 on the dot, the doorbell clean and bright, as if courtesy could polish intent. I offered coffee. They declined. I slid the packet labeled findings toward my son. 14 weeks, I said, 30 transactions flagged preliminary. We'll correct what's wrong and leave what's right. Shannon folded her arms. Joran kept his hands in his pockets, a pose meant to look at ease. Facts first. I walked through the index we built yesterday categories by vendor date memo line. This I said, tapping a boutique hotel charge on a Saturday is tagged Client Hospitality. Your calendar shows Vermont. I moved to a cluster of home furnishings billed to the company card. Could be a reception expense I allowed, but there's no invoice, no event file. I kept my voice even. Numbers don't mind calm. Joran's jaw worked. It was float, he said. Family float. We've always done it. I shook my head. We reimbursed receipts, I said not float. I slid the second packet forward. Schedule A proposes repayment across 12 months at prime plus 1, starting next month. No late fees. I've also asked the bank to enable access logs on the corporate card. It's not punishment, it's housekeeping. Shannon leaned in. Bright smile. Mora. This is all so formal, she said. You shouldn't worry about any of this at your age. Sign the management agreement and let us carry the stress. I looked at the pen, the same model Gannon favored, and let a breath pass. No, I said. I'll keep the stress that bears my name. Conrad kept his hands folded. Ms. Leone dated the acknowledgement page and slid it across. This isn't the plan, I clarified, just a receipt. You've reviewed the findings, and you agree to no further personal charges until the review is complete. Joran stared at the line where his name waited. You're making me look like a thief, he said. I'm making the accounting look like accounting, I answered. If an item proves legitimate, it stays. If not, it returns with interest. The room held quiet but for the harbor horn. Shannon touched his sleeve eyes on the notary's stamp. Sign the receipt, she murmured. He took the pen at last. His signature angled down the page, impatient, but it landed. Ms. Leone affixed her seal with a firm press. No victory dance. I gathered the copies, one for each of us, and thanked them for coming. You'll have a revised schedule on Monday, I said. Email any backup you want, Wade. Shannon lifted her chin. We will. At the door, she paused. People will see this as petty. I met her look. People will see the math. After they left, Ms. Leone initialed the notary log, and Conrad slipped his notes into a thin folder. Partial, he said. Enough, I said. We filed the originals in the desk and locked the drawer. I stood a moment in the kitchen quiet, then smoothed the hair clip like a small compass point and pulled on my raincoat for the drive to Salem. The chamber lobby smelled of floor polish and lilies left from yesterday's memorial. Ms. Dwyer met me under the stair, a stack of proofs in her hand. I've asked Marco to bring the ladder, she said. The founder's wall weighted glass bright the frame, with the cropped photo hanging slightly askew. I brought the caption string from the earlier reel, I said, opening my phone to the email where the full credit ran. Marco clicked his ladder into place. "We can't etch today," Ms. Dwyer said, "but we can mount a corrected placard for the weekend and order the permanent plaque Monday." "That's sufficient," I said. "Dignity can arrive in stages." Marco eased the frame from its hook. Up close, the crop felt personal. My shoulder, present my name gone. He set the replacement placard, Founder Gannon Rhodes and Maura Ellison, behind the glass, leveled it, and stepped down. Ms. Dwyer checked the spacing, then turned to me. "Thank you for the documentation," she said. "We should have caught it." "I appreciate the fix," I answered. Donors crossed the lobby, reading, murmuring. A harbor widow touched my forearm and squeezed. I didn't explain, didn't narrate. I let the corrected line do its work. This moment. On the sidewalk, my phone buzzed. A board member's name flashed with a forwarded text. "Shannon says the harbor's in trouble. Should we pause support?" I typed, "Only all regulatory protections remain in place. Please see the easement summary Ms. Dwyer has on file. More Monday." Then I tucked the phone away and watched gulls turn over the roofline. By dusk, Ms. Dwyer forwarded another message, worry threaded between careful words. "Rumor rides faster than tide." I wrote back one line and set my alarm for morning. Tomorrow would be for proof, not whispers. Ms. Dwyer's message waited when I unlocked the harbor office. I set my purse down, touched the silver clip at my temple, and called before I sat. Donors had heard payroll was late, vendors balking, and that I was confused. I let the sting pass. "Invite a small group to the pier," I said. "No speeches. I'll show them what's true." She exhaled like someone putting a crate down. We chose 9 o'clock. I built a one-page fact pack, revenue lines, deposits cleared Friday, payroll met repairs, queued cash on hand. I added a short easement summary in plain speech, working waterfront use, preserved trustee consent, required for any conversion injunction if breached. Phone numbers and dates sat below, and I clipped 3 sets together. The click steadied me. On my phone, I opened the timestamp overlay and laid a pen beside the packets. Before they arrived, I walked the pier. Once by myself, the forklifts were parked square lines of rope, coiled instead of spilled, and the bait freezer hummed without complaint. I brewed a fresh pot of coffee in the office kitchen and set 4 paper cups by the sink for warm hands and clear heads. They arrived at the gate just after 9, Mrs. Keating in a navy windbreaker, Mr. Alvarez, twisting a cap brim, Ms. Boone precise and unsmiling. I met them outside the fence so nothing felt staged. "Read as we walk," I said. "Measure rumor against what you see." Diesel and wet rope hung in the air. Mr. Trent raised a hand from the shop door. Inside, pay stubs were pinned under magnets along the cork strip. "We post them where the crew can check their hours," Trent said. I touched the line that mattered. Payroll met Friday. I told the donors, tapping the date and then the matching line on my page. 2 contractors chose Wednesday. Those cleared Thursday. Ms. Boone stepped closer and marked her packet. Mr. Alvarez frowned at the rumor in his pocket and slid the phone away. On the dock, a tug idled with a big animal's patience. I held out the maintenance log and signed delivery slips. Fuel arrived on schedule and was paid the next morning. I showed the invoice and the bank debit on my screen, the clock overlay blinking the hour. The mate called a gauge. Trent repeated it and wrote it down. The rhythm spoke for us. Mrs. Keating looked past the pilings toward the chop. "My father sailed out of this harbor," she said. I nodded. Back in the office, I slid the easement summary across the counter. "This preserves work," I said. "It bars conversion without my consent and gives us a remedy if someone tries." They read the highlighted sentence in silence. "So a condo plan hits this wall first," Ms. Boone said. Every time I answered. In daylight, I did not add names. My handheld crackled tow for blue trawler at B-Dock routine assist. Copy Trent replied and checked the safety list with the mate. The call log filled in time crew hull number. "You wanted to see if we work," I said. "We work." Mr. Alvarez's shoulders loosened. Ms. Boone asked about insurance certificates. Trent pointed to the binder and the renewal date. I made a note to send copies Monday. Mrs. Keating tucked hair behind her ear. "Thank you," she said. In the late afternoon, we used the community hall. Folding chairs, glass jugs of water, a finicky microphone. Ms. Dwyer welcomed a dozen faces who had come with questions and a few who had come to watch. I didn't pitch. I answered in order cash flow timing vendor credits dry dock our charitable commitments for the quarter. "Are you asking us for more?" Someone said. "No," I said. "I'm offering clarity. Support stands or pauses on your timetable." A man from a boat family asked why we had paid for paint before a haul-out. "Vendor discount for early purchase," I said, and showed the email. A teacher asked how we handle storms if the fuel truck is delayed, redundant supply, and a reserve tank. I said, pointing to the printed contingency line. We stayed with what could be shown. When a younger board member tried to drag us into gossip, Ms. Dwyer shook her head once, and the room returned to paper dates and numbers. When the last question closed, the 3 donors stepped aside with Ms. Dwyer. I stacked chairs and waited with the peace that comes from having nothing else to prove. They returned in a few minutes. "We will continue as scheduled," Ms. Boone said with quarterly reviews. "Host the first at your office." Mr. Alvarez nodded. Relief softened his face. Mrs. Keating squeezed my hand. "We'll be there." Enough was enough. We folded the last chairs. Marco slipped in, checking the portable screen, and waved from the doorway. Ms. Dwyer's phone buzzed. She glanced down and drew her brows together. "Forwarded email," she said. "Developer rep requests a Monday meeting at the harbor. Requested by Duran." I breathed in, then out. "Then Monday he'll read the same sentences you did," I said. "In daylight with the tide on record." "I'll confirm 10 o'clock, she said. We turned off the lights and the stage faded to its bare outline. The hall smelled of floor polish and summer dust. Outside, the sky leaned blue over the masts. I locked the door and heard it seal the way a good door does, snug and final. Night air waited outside. Proof I've learned is its own kind of kindness. It spares everyone a performance and leaves the room upright. The hall lights clicked off, but the subject line on Ms. Dwyer's phone didn't develop or rep Monday 10:0 a.m. At 10 sharp, a man in a narrow suit paused at our gate like he owned noon. He carried a card case and a smile that closed early. "Caro," he said, tapping his own card. A friendly walk through Ms. Ellison. 15 minutes. We're aligned on the harbor's highest and best use. Gulls looped over the pier. The winch hummed. I buzzed him in, but kept us on the office side of the glass. My silver hair clip caught the window's light. Grief stayed in its lane. Procedure would do the talking. The lobby smelled faintly of rope and lemon cleaner. I turned the visitor log so the pen's chain draped between us. "Sign in," he wrote with a flourish. I set 2 single-page NDAs on the counter for any non-public operations you might see or hear. He skimmed, smiled, and nudged them back. "We're neighbors, not adversaries. Only a courtesy call." "Then we'll stay in the lobby," I said, and did not move. Behind him, the harbor radio crackled about a toe. He glanced toward the door, already picturing a tour I wasn't giving. Courtesy that avoids ink often asks to borrow your authority without paying for it. "We represent family interests," he said, leaning just enough to suggest we were partners. "There's goodwill attached to this waterfront, and I've been asked to explore outcomes that protect legacy while unlocking value. Your son has been admirably proactive." The word "son" cooled the air behind my ribs. I squared the visitor log with the counter's edge. "A plan is a thing that has to stand in daylight," I said. "Ours does." He waited for me to fill the silence with hospitality. I let it stand like a piling, useful, unmoved, older than both of us. I placed a certified copy of the easement on the counter and the memorandum of trust we recorded Friday. Yellow flags marked the sentences a person could hear. "This property is preserved for working waterfront use," I said. "Non-conversion, no residential development. Any change of use or transfer requires the trustee's written consent." He read face, polite and pinched. His card case clicked open shut, disappointment keeping time. Blue stamps marked the margins. A notary seal winked like a coin set in stone. These were not suggestions. They were rails set in tide-proof stone. He lifted his chin. I slid a note about right of first refusal forward and tapped the reversion clause with my nail. If someone ignores the plain language, we seek injunctive relief, I said. If approved uses are abandoned, rights revert as recorded. He exhaled through his nose the sound men make when a door that always opens does not. Purely exploratory, then. We'll revisit when tempers cool. There are no tempers, I said. There are records. He adjusted his cuff as if fabric might substitute for leverage. It didn't. Mr. Trent knocked and stepped in with the portmaster's log under his arm, the leather square and stubborn. I had tabbed a page. Read June 12, 2019, I said. He set his thumb and found the line. Meeting with J.R. Ree outside, bid he read. Discuss sale to developer at premium. Declined. Harbor is a community lifeline. Keep it working. He looked up once. Signed Gannon R. The room stilled like a dock at first light, even the radio holding its breath. Outside, a gull pecked the rail twice and gave up. Even birds know lines. Caro closed his case and placed both hands on it as if weight might change what papers do. I'll take your points under advisement, he said. Perhaps there's a future moment when alignment is achievable. Any further contact goes through counsel, I said. Email only. Do not lobby staff volunteers or board. We log interference. His smile returned like a porch light, automatic, not warm. He backed toward the door and chose not to look at the yard he wouldn't tour. The latch clicked, once satisfied. When the latch clicked, I photocopied his card at 1-to-1 and stapled it to a clean page. I wrote the time, the weather, the clauses I had shown, and the phrases he had tested. Marco slid in with a toner cartridge, read the header without comment, and set a neat stack by my elbow. Want me to PDF and email to Conrad, he said. Please. The copier chuffed. A Tug's horn answered. I saved the file under Developer Approach Caro 6/1625. Paper is how we remember without raising our voices. I called Conrad and left a summary ticking each document by name, each phrase by page number. My voice offered nothing extra. He texted 2 minutes later, prepare a notice re-interference and misuse of company image. Also preserve logs of any donor communications where doubt is seeded. I pinned the text to the memo and set a new blue folder beside the red one. The work of staying calm is mostly clerical. My email pinged. The subject line had my name and one word too many, petition to remove trustee intent to file. It came from Duran's address. The body 3 sentences shorter than the harm it wanted. I printed it, clipped it to a blank incident sheet, and slid both into a fresh drawer labeled in pencil, litigation potential. Then I dialed Conrad. If he files, I said when he answered, we answer in daylight, not whispers. Outside boots rang on the grate. The harbor kept working. The courier arrived before the kettle finished its whistle. He set a thick envelope on my kitchen table, took a signature on his screen, and was gone before the steam rose. I slid the packet beside my ledger and breathed until the first sting dulled. Then I texted Conrad, received, opening now. The paring knife slipped under the flap. Petition to remove trustee blazed across the first page as if bold could make fiction real. My silver clip held my hair while my hand steadied. I read without flinching. Allegation by allegation, I penciled the margins. Mismanagement, unavailability, risk to donors. Beside each, I wrote a single word exhibit and left a blank. When the kettle clicked off, I poured tea and returned to the table. I laid out a second stack, my calendar printout, the corrected memorial program, 3 donor emails from yesterday. In the next room, the harbor radio murmured, a tow checked and a crew signed off. Work continued. Accusations were weather. Records were anchors. By 9:40, I was in Conrad Blake's office under a county map. He read the petition, once then opened a binder and penciled letters down the spine. A through F, he said. Let paper carry tone. We built it like a dock piece by piece. A, the working waterfront easement and memo of trust. B, cash flow showing payroll met and repairs funded. C, Gannon's 2019 log refusing a sale. D. The memorial replay with my caption and the chair's apology. E. Donor emails unpausing support. F. Joran's notarized acknowledgement. And the temporary freeze. The stack cooled the room. Answer first, Conrad said, turning to his keyboard. He typed in a steady rhythm, each denial clipped each reference tied to a tab. Respondent denies and states the record speaks for itself, became our drumbeat. He added a companion filing notice of non-interference and preservation of operations. Its sentences were plain: no lobbying staff, no private donor talks, no use of marks or images outside official channels. He wrote like a man repairing a hull, not flashy, but sound. My turn came next. Conrad drafted a brief declaration in my voice availability logs, the donor huddle at the harbor, the program correction I secured without taking a microphone. No speeches, no adjectives, only times, places, names, and who witnessed what. Miss Leone entered with a notary seal. We checked my license, read the lines aloud, and I signed in the steady tone my hand keeps for mortgages and birth certificates. The seal pressed with a quiet bite. Paper warmed under my palm. E-filing made the daylight formal. Conrad uploaded the response and the notice. The portal returned a docket number and a timestamp down to the second. A clerk called to confirm acceptance and advised us that a status conference would appear in 7 days. While we were still on the line, an interim entry posted, "No asset transfers, no title changes. Maintain ordinary operations." The harbor could keep breathing. I wrote the docket number on my palm and then in my planner also. We engaged a process server and sent courtesy PDFs to opposing counsel, to Ms. Dwyer as board chair, and to the 3 donors who had asked for clarity. The subject line read, "Filed response for transparency." The body stayed clean filings, attached exhibits, labeled Operation Stable. Within an hour, delivery receipts stacked like coiled lines in my inbox. A number I did not recognize rang twice. I let it go to voicemail and forwarded the transcript to Conrad. No side doors, no shadows. By mid-afternoon, the board reply posted to its public page. Operations remain stable. Litigation is pending. The board has no further comment. It was neutral on purpose. The temperature dropped in the room. I could not see the room where donors, vendors, and rumors share air. Ms. Dwyer texted a thumbs up and the time of the post. I saved both to the binder index. Optics settle when paper stands upright. You do not win hearts with filings, but you can stop the bleeding. Shannon's polished post arrived like perfume in a room already clean, tasteful concern about our community's future and transparency we all deserve. I did not answer. I clipped a screenshot to an email for Conrad with one line, "Potential Exhibit G context only." Then I archived it and turned my phone face down. To argue online is to water weeds. From the shop, the radio crackled. A barge cleared the outer markers. A laugh carried across the lot and thinned in the wind. Evening came to the water the way it always does, first in the corners, then in the glass, then in your chest. I pinned the silver clip where it holds best and set reminders for discovery deadlines, witness lists, and the 7-day conference. I slid the exhibit binder into the safe and locked it. When I checked email once more, the docket pinged with a judge's initials and a date, Wednesday at 9:30. I took 2 clean folders and wrote, "Hearing between." The second would hold whatever arrived before the first. The kettle clicked again, the small metronome of houses that keep going. I poured water over a tea bag and watched steam fog the window where the harbor keeps its patient light. Grief did not leave. It rarely does. But it stood aside for the work. I set the hearing folder on the table, then the one for the gap, and breathed until the plan felt like morning. Outside, a buoy bell marked the hour. Inside, I shut the light and let the documents keep their own watch. The deck arrived by email at 4:06 p.m., glossy and cheerful even on my small screen. I printed 2 sets stamped each footer with the date, then replied to the sender, Mr. Caro, with one attachment, a single page from our easement, the clause that never raises its voice. I wrote, for your reference during tonight's information session, no lecture, no threat. I closed the lid and slid fresh paper into my binder. Ms. Dwyer called 10 minutes later. "We'll keep this to an information session," she said, careful and fair. On the record minutes kept timed questions. "That's all I'm asking," I told her. "Facts in daylight." I added a pocket folder to my bag and a small stapler. Precision is a kind of mercy. By 5, the chamber community room smelled of coffee and floor polish. Marco tested the projector. The title slide, "Revitalizing the Waterfront," glowed against the wall. I asked for the agenda to show the clock blocks. Ms. Dwyer nodded and added them in neat pen next to "Welcome Presentation Q&A." She clipped the minutes to a board and set it at the front table where anyone could see. Chairs formed a U around the projector cart. Donors took seats along the wall. Mrs. Keating with her notebook, Mr. Alvarez with folded arms, Ms. Boone tapping a pen against her thigh. I placed the exhibit binder at the center table and sat hands still. Duran lingered near the exit as if a door could offer him leverage. Shannon slipped into the back row, face arranged into a public smile. Caro set his laptop on the cart like a salesman opening a case. "Thank you all," he said, easy and warm. "Our team believes in the highest and best use of this incredible site." Slides flicked past, rendering sunlight on glass, a ribbon of people strolling where cranes now stand. Words like alignment activation and unlock clicked into the minutes by Ms. Dwyer's steady hand. He praised family vision and community benefits and never once said the word sell. I waited until his last slide rested on next steps. Then I stood long enough to connect my own laptop. On the screen beside his beautiful tower, I placed the quiet page I had printed. "The easement controls use. Consent remains with the trustee," I said. One sentence. No more. Air shifted. Pen stopped tapping. A cough at the back row tried to fill the silence. Caro smiled as if we were discussing weather. "Easements can be amended," he said. "Not without the trustee," I replied, and did not smile back. Ms. Dwyer lifted her pen. Noted she said to the record. I asked Marco to switch to the document camera. Mr. Trent stepped forward, Gannon's logbook open to a tab from 2019. He cleared his throat and read plain and low. "Declined approach to sell to developers. Harbor is a community lifeline. Keep it working. Keep it honest." He closed the book and breathed out. That voice, my husband's on paper, filled more space than the glossy renderings ever could. We moved to cash flow. I handed out the one-page snapshot, payroll, met repairs, scheduled fuel, prepaid, vendor credits recorded. No spin. Operation stable, Ms. Dwyer read aloud and wrote the same words into the minutes. Mrs. Keating's pen paused on her notebook. Mr. Alvarez's shoulders eased. Ms. Boone stopped tapping. I turned back to Caro. "Do you hold trustee consent today?" He hesitated, then answered the only honest way. "No." Ms. Dwyer looked up. Minute that she told the room. Marco clicked stop on the projector. The meeting by agenda and by wish had reached its end. Before we dispersed, Ms. Dwyer recapped aloud for the board mic time of start and end exhibits shown, and the single answer to the consent question. She initialed each line, dated it, and clipped a copy for the file. The small ritual steadied the room. People like to believe decisions come from thunder. Most of the time, they come from ink drying on ordinary paper. I packed the binder slowly so everyone who needed to watch me do it had the chance. No one raised a voice. They didn't have to. In the hallway, Duran closed the distance with the careful anger of someone who prefers applause. "You embarrassed me?" he said too close. I shifted the minutes board slightly so the pages faced him. "That is the record," I said. "It belongs to the room." Shannon floated a sentence that would photograph well. "We all want what's best for the community," she said, soft air around hard intent. I'm sure the minutes will reflect that I said, and let the silence hold. Back at the seaside house, the windows breathed the last heat from the day, and the harbor sent up a night breeze that smelled like rope and diesel. I set the kettle on out of habit and never poured the water. I sat at the kitchen table, opened a fresh message, and typed without emotion. No settlement discussions. All communications through council. I will protect the harbor. I CC'd Conrad and hit send. No flourish, no post. I set 2 folders out on the table labeled in block letters, hearing exhibits and hearing notes. The silver hair clip warmed under my fingers as I checked the morning alarm and locked the binder in the safe. On the counter, my phone lit with a dull square of light and then went dark again. I turned off the kitchen lamp and listened for the small sounds a good house makes at night. The house settled, and so did I. At 9:28 the next morning, the bailiff opened the courtroom door and called our case. I set the binder down, raised my right hand, and let the record speak before I did. The bailiff called our case at 9:30. My silver hair clip held fast. Conrad nodded once. I breathed in and answered the clerk's questions, name and role, nothing more. Petitioner's counsel began with a measured cadence: mismanagement, unavailability, instability. I wrote 3 words on my pad cash flow easement minutes and underlined each. I did not look back at Joran. I kept my eyes on the bench and the light rectangle on the floor. Conrad rose. "Exhibit A," he said, and placed the certified easement and memorandum of trust on the rail. The judge read quickly, lips moving over the clauses. Non-conversion, maritime use, trustee consent. She looked to petitioner's table. "Do you hold trustee consent today a beat?" And then the answer I expected. "No, Your Honor." The sound settled like a gavel. Next, the judge said. Mr. Trent took the stand. He held Daniel's log like a hymnal. Sworn, he turned to June 12, 2019, and read Daniel declined an approach to sell, noting the harbor as a community lifeline and refusing to risk jobs for speculation. Counsel objected, overruled. Mr. Trent stepped down, palms flat, eyes clear. Conrad moved through the rest in an orderly line. Cash flow snapshot, payroll, met repairs scheduled. Donor email support unpaused with quarterly checks. The corrected program and minutes from the memorial apology acknowledged. Each page bore a timestamp, the same story. My shoulders lowered not in triumph, but in alignment. The judge folded her hands. The petition to remove the trustee is denied. She spoke without drama. A protective order will enter prohibiting interference with operations and any contact outside counsel. No personal draws. A supervised accounting within 30 days. Status review in 60. Costs reserved. The clerk read the orders into the record. I exhaled steady. In the hallway, Joran stepped in front of me. "You made me look small." His voice was low and tight. I set the binder against my hip. "The record made itself," I said, and stepped aside so others could pass. He paused, then moved away. I watched his shoulders go stiff, then disappear into the elevator with Shannon at his arm. I did not follow. After noon, I walked to the chamber office. Ms. Dwyer waited with a single sheet on letterhead. Caro's firm had reviewed the easement and withdrew interest without prejudice, the phrase read. She logged the letter into the minutes. No speeches. We exchanged one practical nod like a line made fast. Outside on the steps, Conrad texted me the stamped orders before I reached the curb. He would circulate them to opposing counsel and the chamber chair. Ms. Leone would block time to assemble the supervised accounting so no one could claim the books were a maze. "Plain folders, clear labels," I replied. It was not victory. It was housekeeping, the kind that keeps a place fit for neighbors. I drove to the harbor office and pinned a certified copy of the protective order to the corkboard beside the crew roster. Mr. Trent read it twice and said, "So we work, I answered. We reviewed the week fuel delivery Wednesday, a tow on Thursday at 4, one engine mount overdue for replacement. I signed 2 vendor checks and moved a maintenance line forward so Saturday's crew would not be caught short. Supervised accounting does not slow the boats, I told him. It just puts every receipt in daylight. Before I left, I called Anitra from the pier and asked for an audit kickoff on Friday. Line by line with explanations, I said. Fair to the penny. The wind pushed the smell of diesel and salt against my coat. I looked down the hulls and thought that clarity was a kind of mercy on the water and in families. We posted the week's hours on the door where anyone could read them. By evening, the community hall filled with familiar jackets and sunburned faces. The room hummed with working fatigue. I announced the Working Waterfront Fund $2 million to start scholarships and emergency grants for crews and yards along the coast. I said one sentence, Work keeps families afloat. Applause rose. A widow pressed mine and whispered, "Thank you for seeing us." I told her I had been seen too. Later at my kitchen table, I addressed a padded envelope to my son. Inside, I placed the spare key I had kept for emergencies and a one-page letter. "I love you. I will answer you through counsel, and I will protect the harbor. My self-respect is not for sale." I sealed it and printed a certified label. The act felt neither cruel nor soft. It felt clean, like drawing a line with a carpenter's chalk. Night gathered at the seawall outside the house. The tide breathed against stone. I sat with the binder closed and the clip cool in my palm. A tug droned somewhere beyond the point, steady as a clock. "I kept it steady, Daniel," I said into the dark. The phone lay face down beside me. No alerts, no buzzing. Just the old rhythm of water and the faint clink of halyards. I went in, turned the deadbolt, and set 2 clean folders by the door for whatever tomorrow brings, one for the work, one for the rest. On the fridge, under a magnet shaped like a gull, the hearing date was already passed. Today's calendar box held a small check mark. I rinsed my cup, clicked off the light, and let the house keep its quiet. I locked up. Standing on that seawall, I learned this: love without boundaries invites loss, but love with boundaries makes room for dignity. Facts outlast gossip. Quiet work outlasts noise. If your family tests you, breathe, write everything down, ask for witnesses, and leave the door cracked for reconciliation without surrendering who you are. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever chosen respect over approval and paid a price for it? If this story reached you, please subscribe and stay for the next one. Drop a 1 in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. And if it didn't land for you, say why and how I can do better. We're neighbors here. We learn by listening.